Welcome to the smartest people in the room. We are glad you are here, and just by showing up, you're already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, I am pleased to present a modified format for our program in two ways. First, I'm featuring three amazingly smart guests rather than the standard two. And second, I am conducting the interview, and that's the shakiest part of these proceedings. That notwithstanding, I promise you will leave smarter and more enlightened than you arrived. Before we get started, please let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. I run the music practice at Turnkey ZRG, and I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and make some new ones. And ask questions of our speakers. We will try to address as many of those as possible during the conversation. Also, please make sure your chat is set to address everyone, not just the host and speakers. I want to thank our program sponsors, for without their support, we could not do this for free. Special thanks to First Horizon Bank, Turnkey ZRG, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, MedJet, Tennessee Brew Works, Project Music, and Better Than Booze. So let's get down to business. My three guests today are three seasoned Nashville-based music executives who, before coming together to launch an exciting new startup, had already achieved considerable success on their own. Now that the Super Friends have united, they are working to solve a very complex problem involving AI and its impact on rights holders around the concept of name, image, and likeness. The trio consists of Charles Alexander, Jeremy Brook, and Sada Garba. Charles is the CEO. Billy Joel once told Charles to move to Nashville, so he did. Data is his love language, and after working as a bioinformaticist, God knows.
Nicely done.
Don't hurt yourself, Tom.
In biomedical research on projects related to the Human Genome Project, he brought those skills to the music industry. He's a pioneer in the streaming, marketing, playlisting, and strategy space. What he left off of his bio is he's one hell of a songwriter and also one of the nicest humans I've ever met.
That's very
Jeremy
kind,
Brook
Tom.
is the COO and general counsel. 15 years of legal practice advising creators, entrepreneurs, and business in music, entertainment, and other creative enterprises. Embarrassingly poor guitar player, but dangerous in the kitchen. He's founder and principal of the Brook Law Firm, co-founder and head of business affairs, and launcher of this business. He's got 2 degrees from Georgia. That's a management undergrad and a JD law degree. Yeah, obviously, you know what football team he pulls for. Go Dogs.
No question there.
And Sada Garba is the CTO, entrepreneur, polymath, software and product developer, started in games before growing into a full stack developer and software architect. Most recently, co-founder and CTO of Giveful, a social workplace giving platform, which won the 2020 Nashville Technology Council's Startup of the Year Award. He's CTO and also a launcher. He's got a BCS from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. It is my pleasure to welcome these 3 rock stars to our platform today. So let's get it started, boys. Gentlemen, welcome to the smartest people in the room. And I want to begin by basically saying, Charles, welcome back. And Jeremy and Sada, welcome to your first appearance on this platform. Charles is an old hand here.
Thank you, Tom.
So
emphasis on the old, yeah.
Experienced.
Experienced, yeah.
I want to begin with the company's clever name, ViNIL. Tell me about that and who came up with that.
Well, we threw around some other names before, but Jeremy, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think we were we were thinking about something that's centered around the NIL concept, which stands for name, image, and likeness, and is an acronym that's used a lot in sports these days, but it's also being used in all facets of entertainment and celebrity marketing. And since that is at the core of what we're doing, which is protecting individuals' voice and name and image and likeness in this brave new world of AI digital counterfeits, it sort of came up as a natural fit as we were just talking through things over the last year, and came up with this acronym, which stands for voice, identity, name, image, likeness.
Ah, but it also sounds a lot like somebody's favorite format of music too, doesn't
It
it?
does. And of course, we're putting stamps on authorized content, digital stamps, but stamps nonetheless. And vinyl, of course, is stamped, and is something tangible and permanent. And so, yeah, all of that ties together.
Well, let's delve a little bit more deeply into the problem that you guys are really trying to solve, and that is authorized use of individuals' name, image, and likeness. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so what we're talking about here is publicity rights, which is the right of an individual to their image, their likeness, or their voice. And that right exists in 30 some odd states. There is a federal bill that is in Congress, but hasn't passed yet, and remains to be seen whether it will. But as of right now, this isn't a federal right; it's states' rights. But we have a problem now that we've never had before, which is that when you see a piece of content or you hear a piece of content, you can't be sure whether the face you're seeing or the voice you're hearing was actually authorized by the person it belongs to. And we've seen this pop up a number of times in the last year. The big, as I like to say, crossing the Rubicon moment for AI in music was the fake Drake song "Heart on My Sleeve" that came out a little over a year ago. And that was the moment when the three of us realized that a lot of people were working on AI creator tools, but nobody was working on any market-driven guardrails for this. And some of you may not know, but there was a song that came out that featured Drake and The Weeknd in a duet, a collaboration, and it went viral and it did pretty well, and it was unremarkable, except that Drake and The Weeknd don't get along, number one. And number two, Drake and The Weeknd had nothing to do with it. It was entirely AI generated, and it was indistinguishable from the real thing, both in voice and in style. And so that was a moment for music. Everybody had been talking about this for a long time, and now it was here. So what we're doing is working to establish some market-driven guardrails so that people can know when the content that they're seeing was actually authorized. It's a brand new problem.
So go a little bit deeper on that. How did Heart on My Sleeve actually come to be? How'd that happen?
So, yeah, so there's a producer writer named Ghostwriter. He goes by Ghostwriter, but his channel is Ghostwriter777, I think. And a couple of things to sort of like lay the groundwork. You can create these things called voice models, and the way you create these voice models is to train the AI or the AI generation tool on existing material or material that you want whatever your voice model to sound like. And we actually did this in biomedical research years ago, but we were looking at biomedical research documents. But in this particular case, what you would do is you would take a voice stem from a recording, and then you would take a collection of those, train the model on that, and then you would create a voice model with all those different kinds of software that's out there right now. And it's actually something that was first mentioned or first came into the public consciousness in academic research with a academic named Holly Herndon. And Holly was sort of the pioneer in the voice model creation field. And so what happened was Ghostwriter created a voice model of both Drake and The Weeknd. He wrote an original song, produced it, and then he put those voice models on that track. And that's how the stuff came about. And then he put it up on social media and the whole thing blew up. It was one of the first few instances where the song went to the top of the viral charts, and it also went to the top of, the music consumption charts like Spotify and Apple simultaneously, which rarely happens. Like, it went to #1 on both those consumption and the viral charts. Yeah.
So did he write the song, or did AI write the song in addition
No, he
to?
wrote the song.
He did.
He's so the rumor, and I think it's more than a rumor at this point, is that he's an established music industry producer, and he's got like credits to his name, but he's just choosing to remain anonymous. Yeah. So he wrote, it's an original work, which brought into question some of the legalities around, should the song stay up or should the song come off? Or,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of conversation about that.
Yeah, and Universal, which is Drake's label, was able to get it pulled down because there was a very small piece of an actual copyrighted work in the song, and so they were able to use copyright, the DMCA, to get it pulled down from the DSPs. But had that not been there, there would have been a lot of question about what their recourse is. Because the label doesn't necessarily have rights in an imitation of Drake's voice or The Weeknd's voice. And even for Drake himself, there are some questions about the enforceability of those rights. And that can be very difficult. It's a game of whack-a-mole on the internet. You can imagine trying to remove every Elvis impersonator from the internet. And then imagine trying to do that when every 16-year-old with a smartphone can create a hyper-realistic version of Elvis and send it all over the internet. So when this happened, we were thinking about the Napster era, in which the music industry tried to play that game of whack-a-mole in trying to take down copyright infringing content. And it was a PR disaster, and millions of dollars were spent, and it didn't go anywhere. And so what actually changed the game was when legal streaming services came along, because you weren't going to put that genie back in the bottle. So nobody's going to put the AI genie back in the bottle either. And so we figured that what needs to happen is a paradigm shift in terms of what's the default. Up until this point, we've never had to worry about, is the thing we're seeing real? Is it authentic? And now we do. And so Charles came up with the thought that, well, somebody needs to come up with some way to license these things if people are going to be doing that. And then as we were building it, we realized that the core value proposition here is the stamp and the certificate that Sada is going to talk more about, because that gets into the technicalities of it. But in the physical world, we have anti-counterfeiting laws, and we still have watermarks on our $100 bills, and we still have certificates of authenticity on any memorabilia we're going to buy or anything like that. And so now we need those in the digital world. And so that's what we're doing. And we're making it verifiable, reliable, trackable, and traceable, so that anybody that's in the business ecosystem that is dealing with a celebrity likeness or voice, whether that's on the creative side, as in the case of record labels and music distributors and film studios, or on the commercial side with advertisers and networks and ad agencies, everyone in that ecosystem can be sure that they're not dealing in digital counterfeit goods.
Yeah. And a slight footnote here, Drake lost his mind when that Heart on My Sleeve thing came out. But just late last week, I think Thursday or Friday, he put out a diss track against Kendrick and used AI of Snoop and Tupac. So, it depends on which side of the fence you're on and what day of the week, right?
Yeah, and the Tupac estate is threatening to sue him.
Yeah. So the consent control piece,
Yeah.
So Jeremy, you brought up Sada. I want to learn about how were you guys fortunate enough to find this rock star? because it sounds like he's the technical whiz behind this thing.
Yes,
He
for
is.
now.
He's
And
the wizard.
then, thank you guys. These guys are too kind. A random fact is my wife is part of a band called the Shandellas, and Jeremy Brooke happens to be their attorney. And that's the link, and that's how we first met. Um, and over the last, I would say about a year and a half, we made a habit of meeting regularly, probably once every 2 weeks, to discuss, things we saw in music industry. We're all really passionate about music, and we thought we were solving one problem, which was the discoverability problem for young unknown artists. And then, as Charles mentioned, Heart My Sleeve happened when we realized we need to solve another problem, and that's a problem of trust, really, consent from the artists, and trust on the viewership side, to have the faith and confidence in the content you're consuming, and to know that that has been sanctioned or approved by the content producer themselves. So I can ramble on about the technicalities, but as a techie, I've learned to wait until you ask me for specifics, and I can provide those to you.
So let's go there. How does it work? Let's say that I am an artist or I'm a songwriter and somebody wants to rip my stuff off. Don't know why, but let's say they do. How do I engage with vinyl to make sure that I am protected? What are the steps and the mechanics behind that?
Okay, great. So let's if you're independent, it's one path. If you're not, if you're with a larger label, hopefully your label already has a vinyl account, right? They create one account. Then you, as the artist, go to the vinyl website, and then you register. You register yourself as an account holder. And we do one of two things at that point. We verify your identity, because we need to know absolutely that you are the artist represented in this account. And then we just, much the same way you would verify your identity when you open a bank account, we use established methods of identity verification. And once that's established, you now have a vinyl account. The second step is then to fingerprint or confidently identify the content that you create. So you put out an album, we have things called API integrations with the platform. So this happens a lot quicker than I'm describing it right now. But we make it easy for you to introduce your content to our platform, so that we use the audio and visual properties of the content to fingerprint and identify the content, so it's identifiable out in the wild. We see it once, we fingerprint it, and then we send it off to the DSPs. And then the third aspect is queryability, right? So if you send your album off, by your label sends it off to the DSPs, or more rather an intermediary distributor, those entities can query our API with samples of your song and confidently get back a positive acknowledgement or a negative or a denial about whether or not this is the content belonging to said artist. So you can think of it largely as our own version of a blue check mark for content out in the wild.
So here's a set of use cases that illustrates how it works. So you've got an artist who's on label X. So artist has a new album coming out, label registers for the platform, and artist registers for the platform. Label uploads the content because they are the owner, or at least the licensing controller of that content. Then the system pings the artist account and asks the artist to verify that, yes, this is their voice. And Dan Conley asked about whether this was original works or AI-based works. And the answer is that it could be either, as long as it's authorized. So in this case, if there happened to be a track on there that the artist agreed to allow the label to use a voice clone of that artist's voice, or maybe there's an authorized feature of just like Drake just did with Snoop Dogg, but maybe that's authorized. So then Snoop would have an account also, and it would ping his account. And once we've got all that verified, then the process that Sada described happens. It gets stamped, fingerprinted, and sent out into the wild. And then a second follow-on use case is that same artist has a brand deal with a national, say, cosmetics brand. And that cosmetics brand is doing a national advertising campaign. So they produce their commercial with their advertising agency, and then either the ad agency or the brand registers and uploads that ad, that piece of content. Same process happens. The artist says, yes, this is me, and we're good. And so that way we know it's not the Lainey Wilson situation. It's not the Tom Hanks situation. These are celebrities who were deep faked and had their voices or their likenesses used in advertisements for products that they did not actually endorse. And that's kind of the core of these publicity rights. And then the third use case here with this same artist is maybe she's got her own content and she just wants to be able to tell everyone in the public what is and what may not be authorized. And so she wants all of her own content that she's putting out to have the vinyl certificate on it, so that she can say to her fans, hey, if you see a video of me saying something that you don't think I would say, look for this stamp. And if it doesn't have this, it's probably not me.
And where does that stamp actually reside? Is it a watermark across the video or the photo, or what? How exactly does that manifest?
Yeah, so it's, think of it as I'm going to use some terms here that, just tell me to shut up if you don't.
Give it to me like I'm in second grade.
Okay, so we take the actual content and we run it through an algorithm, and a hashing algorithm, and it produces a unique long string of characters that's only produced by this piece of content. So when that hits like a YouTube or a Spotify, they can send us samples of the song, right, back to us, and then we use that sample to identify the original content, if we've seen it, and send back a yes or a no, whether on the originality or authenticity of the content.
And how long does that query take?
So think of it like using Shazam. Right now, when you're walking, you're in the park. I don't know where you are, in a restaurant. You hear a great song you like, you pull out your phone and then you hit, Shazam. It takes about that long.
Wow, fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a speed of light, essentially, in terms
Yeah,
of,
and
yeah.
this is, it's early days still. The idea is to improve it, scale it up so it works even quicker.
So Norwood Creech is asking a question here. So is it a long string of characters, which echoes what NFT World was doing? Is that true?
It's very similar technology. We also have as some of the guests have guessed, we also have a blockchain persistence layer. So we're taking those IDs and those hash codes produced, and we're persisting it and storing it on chain.
But NFTs were a solution in search of a problem, and that's why the market bottomed out. We're applying similar concepts to an actual problem, which is the usurpation of celebrity likenesses and voices. It's kind of a new form of identity theft. And the other thing that we get asked a lot that I think is a related question is people ask, well, what happens if somebody just copies the file? Which was always the question with NFTs. Well, for us, it doesn't matter, because what we're doing is not tied to a specific file. It's the content of the file that matters. So it doesn't matter if it's a copy or not. This works across all platforms and across all content types.
Yeah, more specifically, it's tied to the audio and the visual properties of the content. That's why it doesn't really matter where it exists. I also saw a question in the chat here, if I may. Someone asked about if it's like NFTs, how much energy do you need to generate? Because we're only using this as a persistence layer, essentially just a database for verification, it doesn't use much at all. We're storing against the chain once, and the query level exists on our side of the platform.
Yeah, we've sort of glossed over a couple of things. And the first is, when we see whatever content it is, when we say we fingerprint, something. It's sort of not exactly analogous, but kind of analogous to if you have a pet and if you chip your pet, right? We have the information for the chip. We don't have information for the entire animal. We just know that that chip identifies this animal. And so once we have the fingerprint, it lives in our media asset library. And so as long as we've seen it, we can then, if anyone pings that particular piece of content, it'll hit the fingerprint if we've seen it. And if we haven't seen it, then we can't verify if it's authentic or not. And that is how the process works. And to Sada's point, it doesn't use much energy at all because it's on the persistence layer. It's not the transactional layer.
Correct.
And it scales. In other words, if I'm Universal Music Group with, dozens of label imprints, hundreds of artists, and thousands of records, does that bog down your system at all?
Well, that's what we're working actively to stay ahead of, because we're expanding. That requires resources. We're accepting and taking all resources, pouring that into speed and scale right now.
But
Yes.
we are building it for that, Tom.
Yes.
And that
Because
is,
we would like this to be a standard for all content.
yeah. Yeah, the goal is for this to be like ISRC codes that are the industry standard. For the blue check is another analogy that was used. So yeah, we want to be able to take in all of that catalog and all the new content as well. So.
Yeah,
So-
and just to be clear, there currently isn't a system or an infrastructure to do all this. The closest thing that we've heard is that Apple has an in-house system that kind of does that, but it's not all the way there. But all the other DSPs at least in the music space, because this has applications outside of music, but in music, there really isn't currently a system where you can sort of be sure that that you can trust what you're looking at or what you're hearing. And second, that there's a consent and control mechanism to sort of, verify that whatever you're putting into systems is actually what's been authorized.
So what does the content owner actually receive back from your system when they log their information, they register their music or their video content? What do they receive in return?
Well, so once the content has been passed through the system, they have access to their accounts and they can click on whatever asset they've uploaded and view the certificate that was generated from that piece of content. So the certificate sort of exists in the ether for, in the cloud. It's not something you can download and take along with you, but it's accessible from the accounts, from your ViNIL accounts.
And do you see the activity around that piece of content, where it has appeared online, for instance, and how it has been used or misused?
Not yet, because that requires scraping and tracking at a scale that really would be counterproductive for us right now, because we're not actually a search and destroy mechanism. We're a purveyor of truth. We recognize this is authentic, and what we haven't seen, we can't actually say is authentic or not. It may be, but we can't say for sure.
Yeah, it's a monitoring and tracking system more than it is sort of a search and destroy mechanism.
So let me ask you this. You guys have been at it now how long?
About
A year.
A year. So how has the market received you so far? What are you hearing from labels and publishers and indies?
It's been pretty positive. We launched at South by Southwest in March. So honestly, we're just over a month after launching, and it's been pretty positive. We've had a lot of conversations with distribution companies. We've had a lot of conversations with rights holders, and they're all super enthusiastic and think this is a need. And then just today, NPR did a piece on generative AI and what that means for the music industry, and we're prominently mentioned in there. So there's a lot of interest around the general problem, and there's a lot of interest and enthusiasm, I think. South by was really, really positive. And And since coming back from that here in Nashville, it's been really, really great. And so we're just, you know, there are some things we can talk about, some things we can't talk about, kind of thing. And so we're hoping that in the summer, late summer, early fall, we'll have all the pieces in place. And by the way, we have the licensing and marketplace piece active. And right now, to Sada's point, we're just trying to scale that to where it can be, well, at scale, so that's where we are.
What are your detractors telling you, if anything at all?
Oh, that's a waste of time. I mean, that is true about any tech venture, right? Or any music venture. And, if you're an artist, right, all about this. And I'm going to use an analogy because I write and perform. But, every performance you go out there and do something, there's always going to be a group of people who are like, you're the best thing ever. Why haven't we heard about you? And then there's always a continuous like, you know what? You should really give this up. You should go do something else, So, yeah, we have a share of detractors. But
Yeah.
it's an overly positive though.
Yeah. Yeah, I think mostly when there's, I would say the responses that haven't been overtly positive have just been more question marks of, well, hey, are you sure this is the right solution, that kind of thing. And, the answer is, of course, nobody's sure what is the right solution, but I think we can say that we've thought about this as much as anybody in the last year. And the three of us have a set of skills and experience that is complementary and allows us to sort of put together a unique viewpoint on this. And, everybody's very focused on enforcement, and rightfully so. And that is kind of the question that we get the most, I would say, is what about enforcement? And I think Dan Conley asked a question about that earlier. And our response to that is that we are a complement to enforcement. We are a tool to help somebody with enforcement if they want to. But again, enforcement's a game of whack-a-mole. The laws are not consistent and they're patchwork right now. And then even when we do have good, consistent, and robust laws, there are going to be AI versions of famous people that are protected by the First Amendment, that are parody or satire, for example. And you may not be able to take those down, but you definitely are going to want a way to say, hey, that's not me. And if you're waiting until after the fact, the damage may already be done. But if you've been proactive and preemptive in putting a stamp on everything that you are actually doing or actually authorizing, well, then when that comes out and that doesn't have it on it, then everybody knows.
So you raise an interesting point, Jeremy. Where is that line between the parody or the real, celebrity? Give me a use case where a parody actually is legit.
Well, that legal question is one that's always going to be super fact intensive, and it lives in a vast sea of gray area. But I'll give you an example that I think is probably one that fits that mold. So there is technology that exists.
This is not legal advice, by the way.
Thank you for doing the disclaimer for me, Charles. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Just so we're clear.
Yeah. Yes, this is an educational hypothetical.
That's right.
Technology exists right now that allows you to create a voice model of the president, and Microsoft just announced some technology that can take a still image and create a hyper realistic video and match it up with a sound recording. So you could create that voice model and you could have the president say something satirical about some policy that you disagree with or that the president would never get behind, match that up with this AI generated video, and it would look like and sound like the president talking about this particular policy, whatever it may be. And that may fall under protected free speech if it's, really satire. Parody and satire are closely related, but not exactly the same. Parody might be more of a character, but you take a hyper realistic version of Indiana Jones that really looks like it's Harrison Ford, for example. There's all kinds of interplay between copyright and the publicity rights here. So it's the complications of this that drove us to do this. That's why we think there needs to be a market-driven solution.
I'm getting a
Yeah.
headache thinking about the possibilities.
Yeah.
I want to recognize Kelly Hoppinjans, who's in the audience, who's an amazing singer-songwriter, and whose graduate work is sort of related to some of this stuff. And she has a question about AI models like Grimes and Holly Herndon. Kelly, we have the licensing marketplace, and we can license the use and the context and the media that may have used those AI voice models, but we ourselves aren't facilitating creating voice models. So you can use, for example, you can use 11 Labs, or you can use Semantic, you can use whatever you want to kind of go
Jason
ahead.
Kirschnell from Speechify is here, so we'll give
Oh,
Speechify a
well,
shout
there you
out.
go. Yeah, Speechify. So there's multiple platforms now that let you do that. And as far as we're concerned, we're agnostic towards whichever voice models you use. The only thing we would sort of be able to license is the context. So for example, if you use that voice model in an ad, if you've used that voice model in a release, an audio release, or a music video, then we would be able to license that.
Now, when you say you're now saying licenses as opposed to authorized use, are you actually issuing licenses for the use of this stuff?
We're not. So Jeremy can speak to more of that.
Sorry, we can facilitate licenses through our marketplace feature that would connect the two sides, the licensee and the licensor. And of course, there's all kinds of examples of that. It could be an authorized AI use of somebody's voice in a song as a feature. It could be a voiceover in a commercial, or there's lots of different use cases, but we can facilitate that. Or if people have content that they've created and they've done the legal work and the licensing off platform, we can just take that in and stamp it and certify it and fingerprint it.
So wading into licensing wades into money. Let's talk a little bit about money. How does your business model work? How are you all getting paid here?
This is an altruistic free service, Tom. No, it's not. So for us, we can live in between, say, the artists and the distribution service. We can live between the distribution service and the DSPs. We can live between the DSPs and the artists or whomever is the rights holder. So there's different places that we can insert ourselves. And we would be able, and the function there would be to basically verify content and make sure it's authorized by the source. And so that's a possible place for us to live. And then, we would, the way that business model would work would be there'd be a specific fee structure for us to be that sort of trust layer and verification layer. The other places that we could possibly live, to Kelly's point, is to facilitate licensing. So we would take a percentage of that license deal if it came down to that. But there's also applications outside of music. So in advertising, for example, again, we would verify and authenticate and make sure that the ad was indeed authorized. So to like the point about Tom Hanks in that dental commercial, so if a celebrity or even an individual, allowed themselves either their natural organic version or an AI version of themselves in an ad, we could verify and authenticate that. And so again, and we would live on top of or integrated into specific ad platforms.
So beyond audio and video and possibly TV advertising, what other brand extensions or applications do you see for this thing?
Sada, do you want to take that?
I mean, there's so many. I mean, we're right now we're looking at we think there's a huge opportunity in the commercial space because we know brands have they have a vested interest in not in not being misrepresented. So that's an obvious thing. We also have a lot of interest recently, actually, at South by in sports name, image and likeness deals and protections, where because it's such a new provision in the law in the marketplace, that there's a lot of guidance that these young athletes are looking for, and we think that there's a lot of application of ViNIL's tools to protect young athletes and people in sports, or
Especially at the college level now, because there's huge opportunity there for these athletes that heretofore didn't exist.
Mhm.
And so we would be able to protect and authenticate and verify some of the stuff that they're doing.
it's
Yeah,
such a young market. So we think getting on board with ViNIL early could go a long way towards protecting the value that these athletes have in their brands.
yeah. In the college market, it's where they make all of their money, except for whatever money may still be handed to them under the table, but we can't do anything about that. And even in the pros, yes, they make a good salary from their team, but really the major athletes, the bulk of their income comes from their sponsorship and endorsement deals. And
Caitlin Clark, right? A
right,
$78,000 annual contract, and this Nike deal is worth what, 70 million, 60 million? I forgot what the
yeah,
number was.
yeah. And, Nike's got $1 billion lifetime deal with Ronaldo. And so what happens if somebody creates a realistic AI version of Ronaldo hawking a competitor's shoe? Even if it's not the competitor that's doing it, it dilutes the value of that deal that Ronaldo has, and it potentially has that dilutive and devaluing impact on the market overall, because if brands can't have a way to signal to the public what's the real deal, they may invest less in these celebrity marketing campaigns. And then the other use case that we haven't talked about yet is government communications. Any communications that come from government officials, obviously there's a real, I don't think it's too much to say, a public danger in fake communications, video and audio communications from public officials. And so if we can signal to the public which ones are the actual authentic ones, then I think that, sort of provides a public service here as well.
It's an election year.
So again, at the moment of truth, when the public is engaging with the content, how do they know it's the real thing that they're seeing? How do they see that fingerprint, so to speak?
So they maybe and maybe not, because again, it's important to consider that we are really a business to business play, right? So we're saying if your favorite medium of technical or online consumption is Vimeo, for instance, right? Then Vimeo would be a client of ours, and you can trust that the content sent to Vimeo has gone through ViNIL's processes and is authentic and has been verified, right? Yeah, that's one way. But for just curious individuals or curious, bystanders out in the wild, on our roadmap are a couple of tools. One of them is a Chrome extension, really a browser extension in general, that allows you to just turn it on when you're like a YouTube, or for instance, and it'll give you the equivalent of a ViNIL checkmark on that content. But we know that the use case for such extensions is very low. The real value is to the businesses that distribute and provide content to these to these like Spotify's of the world and the Apple Music of the world.
Yeah, and if I can kind of run with that, Norwood asked about the Elvis Act, which passed in Tennessee about a week or two after we launched, actually. It stands, as he notes in the chat, for the Ensuring Likeness, Voice, and Image Security Act. And it is the first law designed to specifically address the AI deepfake problem. And so Tennessee, was sort of racing to be the first state to address that. Other states are working on similar laws, as well as is the federal government and Congress. It does a couple of things. One is it adds voice to the protected elements of a person's identity in Tennessee. Previously, voice was not included. It was only name, image, and likeness. And then it also sort of expands the protection, and this is the controversial part. The way it's drafted, it's so expansive that any copy or replication of a person's voice or image could violate the law, and that could potentially run afoul of the First Amendment, because there could be some very legitimate replications of a person's voice or image, like an Elvis impersonator. That's not an AI deepfake. So courts will have to sort that out. The other thing it does that doesn't get talked about nearly as much, but I think underscores the need for vinyl, is that it creates a higher risk of liability for media companies. So media companies are the broadcasters and the networks and the social media companies and the streaming services, et cetera. So the old standard was that media companies were not liable for a violation of publicity rights in Tennessee unless they knew the use was unauthorized. Now the standard is that they're not liable unless they know or reasonably should have known. So what does that mean, that they reasonably should have known? I don't think anybody really knows. And if I'm a media company, I'm not sure I want to take that risk about whether I reasonably should have known. And so we believe that vinyl provides everybody in that ecosystem a way to be sure that the content they're dealing with was authorized. So right now, that B2B marketing play that Sada was talking about, we think that's probably where the major pain point is. But as we establish beachheads and grow here, we expect this to become an industry standard so that everybody can be looking for this and know that they can trust it.
Very good. So another validation of how, clever your solution is companies that are investing in you guys. How is your fundraising going so far? What can you tell us about that?
Going well. Yeah, we've had some investments come in and had some really positive ongoing meetings with interested parties. So the meetings that we're having right now are our investors and then companies that are interested in working with us to go to market to test the specifics of our business model and work all those things out. So we've had a lot of really positive interest from a lot of different sectors in this and different folks that we're talking to. And what I'm encouraged by is that even even some folks who initially you sort of you tell them you have a startup and they get that a lot, and so they sort of kind of keep you at arm's length. And then I've found that when we tell them about it, give them the elevator pitch or send them our information, then the level of interest increases. So that's very encouraging.
Okay.
Jeremy, there's a great question from Katie Studley at the Orchard that maybe you might want to address, and I think we've thought about.
So the question is, what is a reciprocal agreement a creator makes with vinyl and using the product? I would assume that the content creator agreeing to use the stamp consistently with everything they put out have you all explored potential scenarios in which a creator does not use said stamp in an instance where they maybe aren't 100% willing to stand by the content? A backdoor escape hatch to evade backlash if public response is negative. Would ViNIL require that creators using the platform commit to using it consistently to avoid this type of thing? So we have thought about that scenario, Katie, and it could be that we can establish this well enough that you have to use it for everything or not at all. But I'm not sure how practical that is for enforcing, for us to enforce it. So I think right now my answer is that is a possibility, that somebody doesn't like the content, they're not happy with it, and so they won't agree to the stamp. But there's nothing to keep that content from being released. You know, we're not the enforcement layer. We're simply the folks to come in and tell you that this is authorized. And so if it gets released, then the label or whomever could, still say this, this is authorized, but they wouldn't agree to put the stamp on it. There's also other pressure points there. There's going to be contractual issues between the label and the artist. The label is going to have their contractual enforcement mechanisms, or in the case of an advertisement, the brand or the advertising agency. So we're not the only pressure point here, but yeah, that's a possibility. But we think that's going to be rare.
Yep.
Guys, we've got just a few more minutes. I've got a couple more questions for you. Any competition pop up since you've been starting to work on this that you're aware of?
Yeah, well, yes, I'll mention one, and I'll let Charles mention the other two. There are a few, but none are doing it exactly the way we are, right? They have different implementation methods, or they're focused more on the creative side, on the generation side of things, or they're focused more on copyrights. I know there's this, it's easy to conflate copyrights with publicity rights, and we're really squarely focused on the publicity rights, and people tracking like how much they get paid per song. That's a totally different issue, and a lot of companies are focused on that. That said, there is music AI, but you are bound to use their own models, right?
Voice models.
Voice models to create content, and they're AI specific. We are really AI agnostic. We will certify your content, whether you use an AI model to create it or not. So, short answer, are there competitors out there? Yes. Is there any one out there that we know of that looks and feels and is doing what ViNIL is doing? No, not at all.
Yeah. So I'll just toot our own horn and say we're the first to market and first of its kind in terms of all the things that we're bundling together, which is the verification piece, the licensing piece, the tracking and trust piece. Those things don't exist on any other product that we're aware of. And there's sort of like different sort of pieces of it a la carte that live out there in the world. And some of them look really good. So like Music AI's voice model situation is really, really nice. Plus you can create stems from tracks with Music AI. Or is it AI music? I forget, And then Google has a product called Dream Track where you can license, well-known artists, their voice models for your content on YouTube, specifically in that context. Yeah, there's some really nice products out there, I think, but none that do what we do.
They're all sort of in the orbit, but we're really the first ones to specifically address this publicity rights problem, which is this artist identity, or artist is too narrow. It's really an individual identity problem because of all the other use cases we've talked about with athletes and actors and influencers and even government officials. So we seem to be the first ones specifically addressing that. A lot of others are working on the problem of tracking and tracing the ownership and origin of the content itself, which is a copyright problem, which is related, but that's also an older problem that people have been working on for a long time. And this actually ties in, Cass Weinbrunn asked a question in the Q&A about ISWC codes, and I'll also add in ISRC codes there, the W being for musical compositions and the R being for recordings. And is there a way that ISWCs can be used with our services? And I think the answer in the long run is yes. I think that all of these things work together in that they're very similar. Those codes are indicators of the authenticity and origins of that song or that recording, whereas ours is an indicator of the authenticity of the person that appears in it as sort of source indicators. So yeah, I think that we can probably in the future integrate that somehow, because it all ultimately kind of works together as a bundle of reassurance that you can trust the content.
So are you all going to be doing anything around music biz to further talk about this?
Yeah, so I put a link in the chat. We're having a mixer on Wednesday, May 15th at 3 p.m. at the Analog, and we're doing that together with Music Tectonics, the podcast by Rock, Paper, Scissors, and Independent Wealth Management. And it's just going to be an event to come hang out. It's pretty chill. And you know, we'll have demos in the VIP section. And we're going to close out that event with striking matches, my dear friends. And yeah, come hang out with us. And you know, not to be completely, you know, shameless, we're looking for one more sponsor if you're interested, so hit us up.
Yeah.
How can these folks reach you all? What can you put your LinkedIn profiles and or your website in the chat as we wrap up?
Yep, I just
while you-
put, sorry, go ahead, Tom.
And while you're doing that, I want to put each of the three of you on the spot with a personal question. I love hearing about what was your very first concert that you attended?
Oh my goodness.
Sada, you first.
Wow. Okay. Man, I'm going first. We'll have to go back to okay. I'll go back to I went with I lived in Nigeria growing up as a child, northern Nigeria. And my uncle took me, this is a long time ago, to a Majek Fashek concert. He's like kind of world music, reggae, and it was I believe like 1987.
Good
And
one. Never
yeah.
heard of that one.
Majek
World music.
Yeah.
Jeremy, what was your first concert?
New Kids on the Block when I was 6 years old.
We'll edit that out of this video.
Yeah. Hey, you asked what my first one was.
I appreciate the honesty.
Yeah. I didn't say it was my favorite one, but it was my
Charles,
first.
can you top that?
Well, I can maybe bottom that. My first ever show, and I'll never forget this, was Donnie and Marie at Stadium Negara in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And it was pretty damn fun. Yeah.
I love it. Sada, you win. Gentlemen, let me just say this. As you know, I am such a big fan of all three of you. I'm so excited for what you're doing, and I can't wait to watch it evolve and succeed and grow and flourish. So keep doing what you're doing. To the audience, please engage with these people, especially if you are a content owner or a writer or just interested in maybe working with them or maybe investing in them. But nonetheless, engage with them. They're great people. So with that,
before we hang up, I should say this. Tom was instrumental in Jeremy and I meeting because of Who Knew. So we shouldn't forget that. And Tom has been a massive supporter. I was at one of the first Who News and one of the first presenters one year, and I presented a presentation called Spotify's Evil. and that sort of launched my entire career. So there you go.
All roads
Yeah.
lead back to Who Knew.
That's right. That's
Who
where we
knew?
met.
And the
Yeah.
Shindellas performed at a Who Knew event.
That's
Yeah,
right.
it is.
That's right.
Everything's
So-
connected here in Nashville.
Yeah. Thanks
We're
to
all
Tom.
about connectivity.
Thank you,
All
Tom.
right. Well, gentlemen, carry forth and flourish, and I will see you at Music Biz. Look forward to it, folks.
Thanks,
Okay.
Tom.
Take
you.
care.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you,
Everyone.
everybody.